Using the Starlink Mini on shore power is great, but it's kind of an unsightly installation. So I wanted to convert this to a DC power supply. I first tried it just using my 12-volt power supply from my lithium batteries, and the Starlink Mini didn't perform as well as it did when it was plugged in using its shore power. So I'm going to up the voltage to a 24-volt power supply and see how it works. Okay, I'm in my LTV. I want to put my Starlink Mini up in the skylight. So to do that, I'm going to remove this whole surround, and that's easy. Those are the small Robertson screws. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the panel off of my over door compartment, and that's looks like 6 screws, and I'm going to pull this compartment off, and I'm either going to use see if I can use a 10 gauge wire that Leisure ran with my solar pre-wire, or tap off of a 10 gauge or 14 gauge power wire that Leisure already runs up to this panel, you know, that's supporting something else. And I've already removed my generator, my stabilizer jacks, and my old Magnum inverter. So I do have that abandoned wiring that I could possibly use for my Starlink wire. Now I want to use a larger gauge wire, like, you know, I'd rather use something larger than 16 gauge, like 14 gauge or even 10 gauge, because the Starlink uses 12-volt power, but you don't want any voltage drop. So since my lithium batteries are, you know, 13.4 volts sitting or under float charging, so I don't really want any, you know, voltage drop. I want it to try to stay, you know, between 13.4, you know, stay up as high, you know, 12.5 to 13 volts as I can. So the larger the wire, the less voltage drop you're going to get over a long distance, which the wires that run up here, you know, they're basically 15 or even 20 feet long by the time the wire run is done. So, you know, you can have voltage drop. So you want to use as large, you know, as large a wire as you can find. Once I take that panel off and figure out what kind of wiring I've got, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run basically snake a wire from this side of the skylight over to this panel, and underneath you can see the ceiling of the panel. So I probably will have to drill a hole after I remove this, drill a hole up in there, so when I do snake the wire across, I can pull it down behind that panel and connect it to the wire I decide to use. So let me get on with that, and I'll show you what all this looks like once I take it off. All right, so I took off that housing, and here's what it looks like. Up here you can see it's mostly styrofoam. So over here, I should be able to, you've got wood here, just plywood that Leisure uses for the ceiling. And then they put this vinyl padding on top of it. And then there's foam here. So I'm thinking I can snake something right through here. But anyway, and you definitely have the thickness of this foam. I could snake something on the foam side. So I just have to see what I'm going to be able to do. All right, I've got my panel off. I had to take my door off to get to it. My next job is finding out where I have power that I can use that's a big enough wire so I don't have voltage drop. So I will investigate that and tell you what I figure out. I also went ahead and pulled off that trim piece. It just fits in a track. So if you just take a screwdriver and start at one end, it easily pops out of that track. Now I have a clear path to underneath this panel, and you can see it comes all the way inside. So that should be an easy way for me to run the wires that I'm going to use for an outlet jack that fits the Starlink Mini. Okay, what I found out is this relay right here is your water pump relay. And my water pump is connected here on my sea level panel, right there. So these wires right here are going to the water pump. But I actually never use my water pump. I don't like to use my freshwater tank or my water pump because I don't like carrying a bunch of extra water from a weight perspective, and I don't like having to sanitize it frequently, so the water that you're drinking is sanitized, and then you have the issue of the chlorine that you use to sanitize it. So I just don't care for the freshwater tank water. If we use water, we just carry gallon jugs of water, because we boondock, and we've got our boondocking down to about two gallons of water for an overnight stay. They're easy to carry, not heavy, easy to fill up. So I can use this 12 gauge power wire to the water pump that's going to this water pump relay. So I'm going to use that, and then I can use this ground, which these grounds are actually connected, and if you follow it, it connects right here, because this is the ground. The sea level panel uses this ground. It goes right here, up and over here to the ground connection. So I am going to use this for my power wire, my water pump relay for my power wire for my, it's a 12 gauge, which is be plenty. Even if I use my water pump, it would be plenty, because the Starlink Mini only uses, I think maybe about 40 watts or let's see, that would be I believe that'd be 4 amps. It's a factor of 10, roughly. So that would be 4 amps from the battery. But that's really if you're just starting it up. Most of the time when I look at it, it's running like 20 watts. So that would be 2 amps. So that's plenty, that's fine coming from this 12 gauge wire. So I will get on with my installation of my little jack plug. Okay, I'm going to make up my cord that's going to go from the 12 gauge water pump power supply to a 16 gauge wire that I'm going to use from that 12 gauge power wire to a fuse. This is a 5 amp fuse. And then this is an 18 gauge pigtail, like I said, 5.5 millimeter by 2.1 millimeter plug that will fit into the Starlink. And I had this because I use it for cameras, my CCTV cameras. But I will put a link to a cord that you can use that has, you know, a wire end for your Starlink connection. Okay, I've pulled my wire, my power wire for my Starlink Mini, and I got it through up here, and now I'm tucking it into the side so then I can put my trim strip back in. So I will continue tucking it in and basically using this to push the foam, create a little groove for the foam, or you know, basically break the foam away from the wood panel, and then that allows me to have a big enough gap to lay the wire in between. Okay, now I'm just going to take my trim strip and snap it into that groove. It's kind of hard to see, but I'm just starting it in that groove, and I'm just going to snap it all the way in. Okay, then once you get it in the groove, you just go along and snap it back into place. So I will do that along the way and go back. Okay, so I got my trim piece back on, and I just will keep moving on with my wiring. And this is going to work perfectly with my Mini. I've left enough cord so I can connect it, and it will stay. I'll zip tie it up here so it stays, and that gives me plenty of power cord. So that's going to work fine. Okay, I want to show you what I'm doing here. Okay, so remember, I need the ground and the power wire to the water pump relay. And if I follow these back, I see that Leisure has spliced off of the power to send power to the sea level panel. So this is still my power wire, and this is my ground wire. And so I want to trace these all the way back because I want to splice them to the wires I have up here. Now, I do want to point out that every Leisure wire is numbered with a unique number. And if you have the your wiring diagrams, these numbers will be identified for the function, you know, for the purpose that they serve. And if I look on my wiring diagrams, it says 1601 is the power wire. It's a 15 amp fused 12 gauge wire from the coach fuse panel, and it feeds the sea level panel and the water pump relay, which that's exactly what this is doing, because there's two wires spliced together here. So I want to go back closer to my wires right there with both of these wires. So I wanted to get them separated from the pack, and I'll have to take off that tape as well, but I want to get these separated from the pack. So see, I'm going to splice them. Well, I guess I don't have to, they're good enough right here. So I want to splice them. I want to cut them and splice them into this ground and this positive wire that I'm going to use to feed my Starlink outlet. So I will get on with that, and I'm going to use Wago connectors because that's much easier, and I'll be putting a 5 amp fuse holder on this. So I will get on with doing that and come back and show you. Okay, so I'm using this Wago connector, which the number for this is 221412. 4 is the size wire it takes, and 12 is the fact that it's a two holder. And if you look on the side, it has a little arrow, you know, a separation, and that corresponds to how much wire. I don't know if I can get this to focus. Anyway, how much wire you strip back to fit in. Then what you do is you flip up the little levers, and then you just simply slide it on. Slide the wire in and flip the flipper down. And then you can look on this side and see the wire in there. That's all the way to the back. There's no casing. You don't want any casing where that metal bar is. Because you don't want your connector pinching down on the casing. You just want it to be wire, metal to metal. Okay, so that one's done, and now I just need to put the other end on this one. I've got my fuse holder connected to this wire. So I will get on with hooking my wires up. I just wanted to show you how to use that Wago fuse connector, wire splicing connector. Okay, so, and to splice the power wires together, since I cut into the leisure one, I needed a 3 position. So this is a 221-413, and these 221-400 series basically will take up to 12 gauge wire. So this will do like 20 gauge to 12 gauge. This is the same. This is a 221-412 2 position. So that's just perfect for what we're doing here. And then you can pull on this. These Wago connectors are UL listed. They're great. They're not going to pull out. They're very strong. They actually have a very unique clip system in there. So this is a very sturdy connection. Okay, so my positive is done. As I said, this is a 14 amp. Oh, no, this is a 16 amp. I used a 16 amp, or not 16 amp, 16 gauge. This is 16 gauge wire, and this is 16 gauge wire. So I use 16 gauge wire fuse holder, and inside here is a 5 amp fuse. All right, so now I've got my negative and my negative wire that I will splice and do the very same thing with, and I'll need a 3 position Wago for that as well. Okay, so I've got all my connections made, and this ground wire is a black and it has a red stripe because you've stripped it off of this red one. So I put a piece of black heat shrink there so I would make sure I recognize it. It's the ground. Okay, so I've got my ground wire separated, got my Wago connectors. You can see all a nice metal to metal connection there. So now my ground is made. So all my connections are made. And now I can actually test my Starlink Mini. So let me plug it in and see what happens. Okay, I'm adding a 12 volt to 24 volt booster to my Skylight power supply. So here it is, and I'm running the wires through an existing hole that I have in my overdoor panel. And I extended the wire. Here's the 4 wires coming out of the booster. So I extended those wires with pairs of 16 gauge wire. Now what I need to do is disconnect my 5 amp fuse, because I want to wire the booster in line with the 2 wires going to my power supply and the red wire, the power wire that's going into my Starlink Skylight power supply, and the red wire for the fuse. and I want the booster in between the Starlink and the fuse connection. So what I need to do is, let's see, here's I think this is the Starlink power supply. Yeah, so I need to disconnect the red wire from the Starlink power supply and hook it to the red output wire, which is this yellow wire coming out of the yellow wire. The smaller yellow and black wire are the output, and the thicker, these are 14 gauge these are the input. So I want the input wires to the booster to be connected after the fuse. So that's the red wire of the booster connected after the fuse. So that's connected here. And then I want the output, which is this yellow wire, I want the output red of the booster to go to the red that's going to the Starlink power supply. So I will do that and come back. Okay, so basically what I have to do is this red wire going to the fuse is the output of the fuse. This red wire is going up to my Starlink power supply. And this little red wire is a little wire I've tapped off to put some a LED light strip up in here. So don't worry about that one. So what I need to do is disconnect these wires, and then I will reconnect the power supply wire to the thick red wire coming from, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to pull this one out. So this is the output of the fuse, and I want the output of the fuse connected to the input of the 12 volt to 24 volt voltage booster. Okay, so I need two hands, so I'm going to hook those together and I'll come back. Okay, and then I need my output of my voltage booster, which means 12 volt goes in on this larger red wire, and 24 volts comes out on this yellow wire. And so now I need the 24 volts to go up to the Starlink, which is this wire. So I need to add this to this, and then I will have an output of 24 volts going to my Starlink. So I'll do that and come back. Okay. So again, here's my power supply, my 12 to 24 volt booster. Okay, so let's recap on the wiring. I tapped in to this water pump power wire, which is a 12 gauge wire. So that's a nice heavy wire to be adding something to. The water pump only uses like 10 amps. So this is a perfect circuit. 12 amps or 12 gauge wire is good for 20 amps. So this is a perfect circuit to tap into for power. So my power wire that I added is for this 5 amp fuse holder, and it's also 12 gauge. No, this is 16 gauge. Okay, so I used a 16 gauge 5 amp fuse holder, put a 5 amp fuse in it, and I've connected it to the input power of my voltage booster. Then I've connected the output wire of my voltage booster to this red wire, which is going to the positive wire that runs up through the ceiling and goes to my skylight to power the Starlink. So the output now on the Starlink is going to be as high as 24 volts, which is great. Because on my last trip testing just the 12 volt power supply, it didn't really run the Starlink very well because it just needs more voltage. It just needs a higher voltage than what the battery can give while you're using it and all the other things that are going on. So based on what I could see on my experience is you definitely have to have over 13 volts, well over 13 volts. So, even 15 volts, it would probably be better, but the Starlink can actually use, it's rated for 12 to 40 volts. So you can pick a voltage booster, either a 24 volt, 12 to 24 volt, or 12 to 36 volt. I'm actually going to use a 36 volt on my pole, my Starlink pole mount that I connect to my ladder, because I'm going to be using smaller wire over a longer distance. So I want to increase, make sure I have good voltage there. So this 24 volt booster should solve the problem with the Starlink. It likes higher voltage, and for its power when you have it in the skylight, because it can't be aligned, and it really wants to be aligned. So it uses more power because it doesn't like that it's just flat mounted. It also uses more power when it sees obstructions. So if you want to use your Starlink in a very obstructed area, it needs higher voltage. So I'm pretty sure this 24 volt is going to solve my problem, but we'll see when we start testing. Okay, so let's talk about the grounds. I haven't covered the grounds yet. So the large red and black coming from my 12 to 24 volt booster, the large black wire gets hooked in with the main grounds that I'm using for the coach. So that's these white ones that I took off of my water pump ground. And then I have this little ground wire running to LED lights for this over door compartment. And then this wire, this black wire with a little bit of red on it, that is this wire. You can see it running to there. Okay, so all the grounds, the input booster ground is on the coach grounds, which is all basically grounded to the chassis. Okay, so now I'm left with the negative and positive from the input. Let me make sure that's correct. Yeah, the input wire has writing on, the output wire has writing on. So this is the positive output from the booster, and this is the ground output from the booster. Okay, so I want to hook that ground to this ground, which is going to my Starlink Mini plug. So let me put those two together. Okay, so as I said, I want the small ground, which is this one coming from the output, and this is the ground going to this wire up to the Starlink Mini. See if I pull on it, I can pull it in and out. Yeah, okay, so so I need to hook this one and this one together. Now I'm going to use a different Wago connector. This is an inline. So instead of these side by side, I'm just going to put on put this in here. I don't know if I can do this one with one hand, but if I can, I will. And I put that one in there, like so. Okay, so then now you have a nice connection. You can see the metal is on where those bars are, and it's snapped together, so that's a good connection. So you have this option for, also this is a 221 series. I think it's the next numbers are like 2400 something. Anyway, this is a, you know, inline or straight versus these little side-by-side kind. So, okay, so now my grounds are all connected. My positives are all connected and my grounds are all connected. So now I can put this panel back on and test the Starlink Mini. Okay, now I wanted to show that I am putting my 24 volt booster on the outside of my over door panel, because I want to be able to see how hot it gets, if it gets hot. And right now it's, you know, nothing. Okay, here's my new 12 volt power supply. It's not even getting warm, so that's a good thing. I reused an existing screw hole that I had on this cover where I removed my equalizer jack switch. So this is all nice, and I can always feel and make sure that this isn't overheating, which it's not even warm right now, so that's good. Okay, so I'm done installing this 12 volt power, this 12 to 24 volt booster. So let's see how my Starlink works now. Okay, so my Mini, I got my Starlink Mini online, and my statistics are decent. I do have a lot of obstructions where I'm at. You can see it's coming up. So where the Starlink is pointing, there's a lot of obstructions. So, this looks pretty good. So I will see how this does on my next trip. Okay, so there I am. I'm connected. You can see my Starlink power blue light is flashing. So everything's working. Okay, I got everything back together. It looks fantastic. I never even know I did anything. Okay, so now, as I said, I'm using refrigerator extension bars. I think these are the ones that are like 16 by 16 inches, and they can extend to 27 or 17 inches and 27. I can't remember, but they're about that. They're that one. The that's, you know, like 16 inches extends to 27 inches. That's what I'm using here. And then I got a couple of I got a 6 foot long 1/2 inch foam pipe cover that you can get in the plumbing department, and I cut those so that gives some cushion to my Starlink. And now I'm going to come up with an easy, like, Velcro strap system so I can strap my Mini in very easily, and so it stays, you know, secure and doesn't rattle when we're traveling. So I will show you that next. One thing I need to address is how to make disconnecting and connecting between my Starlink Mini home installation and RV installation. At home, I just have the Starlink Mini mounted on a pole. So that means I use the pole mount. But with the pole mount in place, it's very, I mean, you can't like unhook it and hook it easily. You have to remove this whole mount, which is difficult. I mean, you have to pull up on each one of these to release it, and then it comes out. And I just want to try to think of an easier, something that's more, that's easy and more convenient than always removing this and unplugging it. So basically you have to pull up right here, basically to lift this area up so it snaps out of its tabs. I keep this little strap on it so I don't put any stress on my cord. But anyway, so then this, is out of the way, and then you unplug the Mini, which is, they make it difficult because they want it to stay sealed. So, I don't want to have to take this arrangement off and on every time I want to remove the Mini to take it in my Unity. So I'm going to see if I can't figure out something that's easier so I can leave this in place, but then, just disconnect and connect this maybe outside, maybe a little pigtail extension, so then I can plug it in over here. But we'll see what I come up with. Okay, I think I found my solution. I had this waterproof, this piece was on there. I had this waterproof 5.5 by 2.1 millimeter pigtail set. I took this off, and I took a rubber grommet that I had and cut it in half to put a better, a sealing element to the bottom of this. It already has a little rubber thing there, which this fits in, seals in, fits in snug. But then this little grommet pushes in, because it has a little lip on the inside where I cut it, from the other, I think I use this one, yeah, where I cut it in half, so it has that little inside lip that fits right into the hole. So this is a good seal here. And then my Starlink plug fits in fine, fits in perfectly in here, and seals. This little sealing ridges seal inside that little hole. But I think I will drill out this extra cap, the cap that I took off of this piece, so I can actually thread it, screw it onto those threads, and then more of the sealing fins of the Starlink cable will fit in there and seal inside there. So I just make a shorter pigtail that will all be underneath this. So then all I'm doing is plugging off and on to this little pigtail end, and then I don't have so much to take apart when I'm moving it from my house to my RV. It's definitely a good seal, because this part of the rubber is actually fitting down in there. So then this first little fin makes contact and makes the seal. But it's definitely sealed, because it takes quite a bit to get it apart. Okay, so I'll probably put a little sealant down around here, just to make sure this cap is well sealed onto this piece. But this now is going to be the end of my pigtail, so I know I have a good seal when I'm using, the Starlink Mini at my house and it's outside. I don't think you really have to go through the extra step that I went through, to drill out that cap that was on, that pigtail, to give yourself a little bit more sealing of the Starlink mini cable. But since I did it, I'm just going to leave it. But for those of you out there that don't want to fool around, I don't think you really have to do that. It made a good seal just inside of that, with the first rubber part of the rubber end of the Starlink mini cable. Okay, so I'm going to splice my two pigtails together with my very smallest solder connector, and then I'm going to slide this heat shrink over it. Then I'll do the other one with its piece of heat shrink, and then I'll slide these larger black pieces of heat shrink over to seal it, make a nice finished cord. Okay, so here's my pigtail, and I'm ready to put it in place. So I will get that connected, and I'll put this back on and show you what it looks like. This is nice and sealed. Okay, got this part in place, got this up, so now I'll put that on. Okay, I've got this put back into place. It's all snapped in. Now my pigtail is out. That'll be easy for me to connect to. You just need to make sure when you're putting it back in that you don't pinch it. In here, it looks like it's pinched, but it's not really. It's just underneath. But you want to make sure that you put it in straight, so there's no risk of pinching anything all the way back. Okay, so I've got this back into place. Got my little pigtail sticking out, so now it'll be easy for me to plug and unplug in my two locations, using the Starlink cord at my home and then using my new power supply in the skylight of my RV. Okay, here is my final installation. I made that pigtail, works very nicely. I put 24, I believe they're 24-inch, which I'll put a link to, Velcro straps. So they, there's a strap across the top of the Mini, so it's very secure. I probably need to tighten that one up a little bit, but that's fine, because, I just don't want it bouncing, coming off these straps. So yeah, I can tighten these down a little. Oh yeah, I've got a slack right there. Okay, so I can tighten that down more. But anyway, those are going to work easily because they're Velcro, and I just, take them off and then slide the Mini out to take it back and hook it up back at my house. So I will let this stay here for a while and see. I'm at my RV parking spot, and I do have some obstructions, so I reset my obstruction map, so I'll see what it looks like here and what the performance settles down to be in an hour or so. Okay, my Starlink is online, and you can see where I'm parked right now. I do have a lot of obstructions, and my statistics, that ping rate is to be expected with all those obstructions. The latency is also to be expected with obstructions. My power draw is 20 watts. That's great. You can see all my outages as a result of those obstructions. So none of this is surprising. And as I said before, you can't align it when you put it in the skylight. You know, that's just the way it is. I always go to settings when I start it up and reset my obstruction map, so I can always see what kind of obstructions I'm dealing with wherever I'm parked, and then that helps me understand what kind of speed I'm going to get. I have also been toying with an idea of how to align the Starlink Mini. So I found if I put another one of my 3/4 inch couplers in the pipe fitting adapter, then I can set it inside this double tension bar, and I can actually spin it and get it to align up in the skylight. So I'm going to take this with me. You know, I'm going to try it both ways. I'm going to leave it strapped onto my two tension rods across my skylight, and then I'm going to carry this double bar so I can also see if aligning it, particularly when I'm in areas of obstruction, because anything you can do to help the Mini get a satellite signal when you're in a lot of obstructions will help. So I'm going to try this on my next trip, which is in about a week, and I'll see how this works out, which way it works out, or just carry this along as an option for the skylight. And then I've always, got a couple of options of trying to get the Starlink Mini to work wherever I'm at in the sky, out of this skylight.